Because all I want is just to hear that he's the worst person in the world.
People don't understand. ITG does not find the guy who did it. It finds the people who didn't do it. It really does that. Like a lineup. And you say, no, none of those guys did it. That's what it is. The
We didn't have our
we knew
autopsy
about the
report.
gag and the choking and stuff like that. But we didn't know different
Up
weapons.
to then, we
the
didn't
fact
have
that
our
we knew about
autopsy
the
report.
gag and the choking and stuff like that. But we didn't know different
Up
weapons.
to then, we
People don't understand. ITG does not find the guy who did it. It finds the people who didn't do it. It really does that.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And wow, things sure are getting interesting around this thing. You know, last night I watched the Crime Talk attorney guy who is basically Gray Hughes with a attorney license. He was at CrimeCon walking around interviewing people, and man, that dude is a what we call a Nephilim. I mean, he is a giant. And you don't notice that until he goes up and he starts talking to Jesse Weber from Law and Crime. And Jesse Weber is a minuscule man. I mean, he's tiny. And then you got the Crime Talk lawyer and he's standing next to him and you're like, good grief. This looks like something out of a, I'm expecting to see Jack and the Beanstalk. But then he continues around and he gets to Steve G and Mrs. G, and they have a discussion. I put a couple of clips from that discussion in the opening of this one, which I found kind of interesting. I may do a complete breakdown of that conversation they had. Not in this video, though, because in this video, we now have unsealed court documents that I have to start breaking down for you. And in this one, I know people don't like to see Pav get heated and mad at things, but you know what? I'm probably going to get heated and mad as I break down this particular court doc. And when I think about all of the things that we've uncovered in this case, and then think about Bryan Kohbegrer and what he was looking at as he was going into possibly a trial where he was going to, get sentenced to the machinator that they were building for him in Idaho. I think of things like I'm going to be discussing in this video. Might make him go, yeah, I don't have a shot. And mainly because, and I'm going to really pick on that defense team in this one, because I feel like, especially Bicka Barlow, should know better than what I'm going to break down in this video for you. It's the experts that the defense has guiding them through this stuff. I mean, the whole expert thing, and we're putting people's lives in the hands of these experts. Man, expert, yeah. In my humble opinion, I have yet to see an expert in this case. I have seen experts in other cases that I thought did a pretty good job, but I've yet to see any experts in this case do anything that has even come close to what I would consider an expert opinion. And it's going to be on another level in this one because the defense hired an expert, and it relates to all the things that I've been talking about here lately and breaking down. And it is perplexing. And it's amazing to me that they released these documents and I get to read this thing right after I've spent the last 3 weeks, day and night, going through all the forensic reports. Because it is shocking to me what I read after doing all of that. And I think it's going to be shocking to you as well. So Pav might get a little bit heated in this one, but I think it's very important for us to break down because this is the kind of thing that would really go a long way to take an innocent guy and make him shrivel down in his chair and go, I don't have a shot in the world in this thing. What is going on? And yeah, I blame the defense team, specifically Ann Taylor and Bicka Barlow for this one. Hold on to ya hat. So I've been waiting a long time for this to come out not this. This is why I've been waiting a long time for it to come out. But this was the judge's order on the defendant's motion to suppress the genetic information. And I remember in this order, by the way, this was February 19th, 2025. Notice the date here. Because in this order, where they specifically talk about Q1.1, I remember this statement right here. According to defendant's expert, Gary Shuttler, PhD, the male DNA from the mixture was consistent with the Q1.1 profile. Affidavit of Gary Shuttler, December 19, 2024. Importantly, defendant has not claimed ownership or knowledge of the knife sheath from which Q1.1 was taken. Importantly, yeah, that is pretty important. Defendant has not claimed ownership or knowledge of the knife sheath, huh? After obtaining a search warrant, law enforcement collected DNA from a buccal swab obtained from defendant. Of course, it doesn't go into detail where it tells you that they obtained a buccal swab. The FBI did while he was in Pennsylvania. It's in documentation. And then the Idaho State Police, or the Moscow PD, collected another buccal swab once Kohbegrer was booked into the MPD, which I find curious that they took 2 buckles from him. But anyway, a traditional STR DNA comparison was done between Q1.1 profile and the defendant's DNA. The comparison showed a statistical match. Specifically, defendant was 5.37 octillion times more likely to be the source of Q1.1 profile than an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population. Y'all hear me say millions of times. Defendant was subsequently charged in the case. But I've been waiting to see this because of the expert saying the DNA from the mixture was consistent with the Q1.1 profile, defense expert Gary Shuttler. And I always thought that was interesting because it wasn't Bicka Barlow. Well, now we have Gary Shuttler's affidavit. And this is where old Pop gets a little upset with the defense for hiring expert Gary Shuttler after looking at his findings. D18A, Gary Shuttler, PhD. So here's his affidavit. For some reason, though, it says defendant's exhibit number D18, identification evidence, and it dates the affidavit 3/3/25. And then all this is written on February 20th, 2025. So this was more work that Gary Shuttler had done on this case, even after he came to his first conclusions. And he was testifying in the following areas: analysis of DNA and DNA lab practices and CODIS database. Now, because I have gone through all these lab practices as it relates to their manuals, I know that this lab was total crapola. So when I read Shuttler's determination, I get kind of froggy, y'all. I've been retained by the defense in Mr. Kohbegger's case to assist on issues relating to DNA testing and lab practices. Oh, and it goes through his CV. But then down here, we get to determinations. And boy, do I have a problem with Gary Shuttler. Number 1, it says he summarized and organized the results from the biology and DNA reports, analyzed the DNA run data, and reviewed analyst notes, worksheets, and reports for any significant shortcomings, mistakes, or omissions, any significant shortcomings. No significant, impactful issues were observed in the protocols and procedures used. You've got to be kidding me, guy. What are you, blind? Overall, the Idaho State Police Forensic Specialist DNA Analyst lab work, in my opinion, was done to a high standard. My goodness. So the audit I've been calling for has already been done by this jack, and this was his determination. This jack lost me right here. How can you say that with errors and reruns of the critical evidence on both ends that everything was done to a high standard? There's no documentation even of all of the handoffs for the original DNA. Then he goes on to write, however, documentation in the case file was poor. Notes for evidence examination had minimal detail of how items were examined. You don't say. Look here, I said a blind person could see that the documentation was poor due to manipulation, not due to your determination there, Shuttler. I got a bone to pick with this guy. The issue of concern was evident, lack of detail documented about how the knife sheath was co-examined at the time of the biology and latent print examination. The only description of swabbing the front strap was for the biology note, stating used one swab to swab front strap. Light gray transfer, consumptive. Both the latent print lab notes for Tina Walthall and the biology lab notes for Stephanie Wiltz did not have the detail of Riley Nolan's December 12th to 13th, 2022 emails to Detective Tabbitt. Well, if Riley Nolan sends a email with details of this on December 12th, and this was all done on November 20th, and their notes don't have that detail, then how can you say the lab work, in my opinion, was done to a high standard? They're obviously rewriting history here, Jack, on how the knife sheath was examined and swabbed to preserve potential latent print evidence on top of the snap cap. It required Miss Nolan to contact one of the forensic scientists to put all that detail together to respond to the inquiry from Talbot on how that exhibit was processed. No doubt, because Talbot was trying to finish up a report and he needed clear, concise notes to finish up his report. Riley Nolan, the manager, had to go back and make up a bunch of stuff. And this moron, in his opinion, all this is done to a high standard. It required Miss Nolan to contact one of the forensic scientists to put all the details together to respond to the inquiry from Talbot on how the exhibit was processed. It certainly wasn't in either latent print or biology notes from the discovery material examined. Good documentation can prevent problems of this nature and help mitigate memory lapses. Mitigate memory lapses? You gotta be freaking kidding me, man. High standards, mitigate memory lapses? At this point, I had to go a little deeper into Gary Stuttler, and I'm very, very disappointed in the defense team, especially Bicka Barlow, for letting this freaking jack have access to this information and come up with a report like this. Quick cursory search on Stuttler. I find this. Friday, July 23rd, 2004, right? The Washington State Police crime labs slip up. Spokesman review. What do you mean the crime labs slip up? Seattle, the Washington State Patrol's crime labs have recurring problems with DNA contamination and errors. An investigation by the Seattle Post Intelligencer has found. Through public records requests and interviews with defense attorneys and experts, the paper found that forensic scientists made mistakes while handling DNA evidence in at least 23 cases during the past 3 years. Human error is apparently the main problem. In 8 of the 23 faulty cases, forensic scientists tainted tests with their own DNA. They made mistakes in 6 others, ranging from throwing out evidence swabs to misreading results. Tests were contaminated by DNA from unrelated cases in 3 instances. What have we talked about in this case as they're processing other case files, other case evidence with this case? And between the evidence in the same case and another, the source of contamination in 5 other tests is unknown. The Washington State Police contends strict protocols make sure the incidents only represent a fraction of the 1,400 DNA cases handled each year. Well, a fraction of those cases leads how many? 23 cases to wrongful convictions? Good grief. We're as good as any lab and probably better than many, said Barry Logan, the director of the crime labs. Although the labs only recently set up mandatory reporting system for mistakes, officials are 100% certain that with all the precautions, we catch everything, said Gary Shuttler, who supervises the lab system's DNA work. You're 100% certain that with all those precautions, you catch everything, when up here it's telling you that there are 23 cases that y'all totally screwed up. From contaminating your own samples, contaminating case samples with other cases, and then you don't even know what contaminated the other ones. So, yeah, I've lost all faith in Gary Shuttler. He's saying that he's 100% sure that this system's working great with documented cases of failure. So what's funny is as I go on to read this, and I hear this Jack last night tell me as he's talking to Steve G at the Crime Con, and the biggest dipwad on YouTube, that crime talk attorney who couldn't find his freaking butt with both hands, he makes the statement that, oh yeah, he had his phone turned off and all this. Well, there's no coincidences in crime.
Looking at the stars, do you buy that?
Turned his phone off.
And listen, as I say, after 32 years, and I have to tell this to clients sometimes,
You're a busy man.
there are no coincidences in criminal law.
Oh, really? Well, you're saying that about a case that has about 10,000 coincidences. Let me give you another one. Cells in the human body contain a copy of a person's unique DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, which determines a person's eye color, height, and other inherited characteristics. A DNA match is considered infallible proof of guilt or innocence in many crimes. Sophisticated DNA testing has played a crucial role in high-profile cases, such as connecting Gary Ridgway to the Green River unalivings. Crime lab officials do not like to talk about the fact that the same test can link someone to a crime scene with a few tiny cells left on a doorknob, can also be contaminated by a passing sneeze, the paper said. They also do not brag about the fact that DNA tests are only as reliable as the person doing them. The amazing thing is how many screw-ups they have for a technique that they go into court and say is infallible, said, ready for this? William C. Thompson, Bill Thompson.
You're a busy man.
There are no coincidences in criminal law.
Talk about coincidences. A forensic expert and professor of criminology at the law at the University of California, Irvine, who reviewed the incidents at the request of the PI. What we're seeing in these 23 cases is really the tip of the iceberg, Bill Thompson said, explaining that the lab is only catching obvious problems that could signal a more widespread problem, meaning a more widespread problem in the freaking lab Gary Shuttler oversaw, that he says he's 100% certain with all the precautions they catch everything with documented cases that they screwed up. Yeah, there's no coincidences in crime, Bill Thompson. Freaking Jack. Done with Gary Shuttler here, and I'm about to tear his whole dissertation up. This is why these so-called experts, they need to quit saying expert on anything, because they're not experts on nothing, in my opinion.
Because all I want is just to hear that he's the worst person in the world.
People don't understand. IGG does not find the guy who did it. It finds the people who didn't do it. It really does that. Like a lineup. And you say, no, none of those guys did it. That's what it is. The
We didn't
fact
have
that
our
we knew
autopsy
about the
report.
gag and the choking and stuff like that. But we didn't know different
But
weapons.
then we
Now, back to the Stuttler report. He goes on to say there were also at least 9 male DNA reference samples collected but not typed. They might have matched to unknown male B or D and provided pertinent information to help with the investigation. Well, we're going to point out the 9 that he's talking about, but how about the 11? Because we know they had Mowich. They know they had his DNA. They brought it to MPD, put it in evidence. It's listed in evidence in the case. How about Kopaka? You're telling me they didn't get his DNA swab with all the information we have around that? All you worried about is these 9? But let's talk about those 9. See, those 9 are Reed Upmore, Jonathan T. Exene, Mackenzie Briggs, Syringa Riley, Chase Dixon, Caleb Jacobson, Brendan Crawford, Tyler Yelk, and George Samitjis. Those are the 9 he's referring to that they got DNA reference samples from but never processed into an actual comparable sample. So yeah, good point there, but how about these, man? If we don't bring them up, nobody's ever going to know. So then he goes on to say there are limitations of what information the forensic biology and DNA evidence analysis results can provide. To understand the DNA evidence in this homicide case investigation, it is helpful to consider the following questions in particular. For the only DNA profiles reported that were recovered from inside crime scene evidence that were not consistent with any of the victims, it is not reasonable to expect that the perpetrators of such a violent crime would have left traces of DNA and possibly blood. Well, I agree with that statement, but it's what you say next that is ridiculous. Whose unknown DNA was recovered from the DNA evidence? There were only 2 unknown male DNA profiles. This guy is supposed to have gone through all these reports, y'all. Reported that were recovered from inside the crime scene evidence that were not consistent with the victim, Ethan Chapin. One was called unknown male, and that was Q1.1, swab of the front of the K-bar knife sheath found close to a victim's body, of which only the defendant cannot be excluded as the contributor. Great expert here. The other was called unknown male B from item 30. Really? These are the only two that's you got to be kidding me. There were only 2 reported from recovered inside the crime scene, not consistent with Ethan? Yeah, right. I consistently went through report after report after report showing the evidence with Y male chromosomes in there, and they compare them all against Ethan, and he's excluded from the mixture. How about the DNA under Maddie's fingernails? How about the Y in the DNA under Xana's fingernails? It wasn't Ethan. How about the Y in all of Kaylee's fingernails that they never ran against anybody? How about the Y in almost 80% of the samples tested in this case where they compared them all against Ethan and he was declared excluded? So what is this freaking expert talking about? There's only 2 samples? Who do you work for, guy? The defense or the prosecution? And if you do, are you even any good for either one? The other was called unknown male B from item 30, a swab of a small red stain on the underside of the stairwell, north wall between the first and second floors. ISPS crime scene marker identifier B. That excluded all 18 males who had their reference samples collected and tested. Now, this is interesting when he says 18 males who had the reference samples collected and tested. Because I haven't counted 18 in that number, and I certainly haven't seen evidence of 18 compared against anything. We know about desk. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10. And we know about Cruz. That's 11. Showalter, Berenberg, and Chestnut, there's 14. I guess we could add Kohbegrer in there to 15, but that leaves 3 people that has been tested against this evidence, according to that expert, that we don't know. Oh, wait a minute. Jack DeCore, he's number 17. Okay, wait a minute. Jack, Bethany, and Dylan. Okay, no, you're right. 18. 18. No Malwich or Kopaka. Now, this part right here is the only part that so far I've agreed with anything he said on. And I'm glad that he actually points this out because nobody else has pointed this out in this entire case until I seen this from him. And if Turvey would have got the placement of the White Claw box correct, I think this was the biggest impact of the entire case because it proves that a perpetrator left out the front door and it wasn't Bryan Kohbegrer. And with evidence of the perpetrator leaving out the front door, and it wasn't Bryan Kohbegrer, and we know it wasn't Kohbegrer leaving out the back door because of the L5 fingerprint that I don't see anybody talking about in any of this stuff, then, I mean, that's proof that if there was 2 perpetrators, neither one of them was Bryan. The only part of this I can finally say something that this guy has pointed out is accurate. But here's what he points out, and I'm glad he did. The presumed bloodstains location, talking about unknown male B, was near presumed bloodstains, item 31.1. That's Ethan's swab going from the second to the first floor on the handrail, blocked by the White Claw box, so you know what was happening as somebody walked down the stairs. And it was found to be consistent with victim Ethan Chapin, right? And presumed blood stains on item 72 on the north wall of the stairwell, correct? And 73 on the half wall, correct? And those were identifiers 23 and 26 respectively that were reported to be consistent with victims Kaylee and Maddie. Refer to photos and reference for position information. Now he's saying that 23 was actually item 2 on the north wall of the stairwell. And I was thinking they did 24. So if he's saying it was 23, there was a lot more blood on that one. But I'm glad he pointed it out because it's what I've been screaming from the rooftops. He's pointing out that unknown male B was found amidst all of these other samples. Now, he doesn't mention the untested DNA of the actual transfer from A. He doesn't mention the blood that was never tested that's dripping off this handrail right here of C, which perplexes me. But he does mention 26, which is on the half rail, on the half wall on this side. He mentions Ethan's transfer, which with the White Claw box in the proper position could only have happened if somebody's walking down the stairs. And then he mentions 23. I thought it was 24. He may be right. Maybe 23 was Maddie, Major Kaylee, Minor Maddie, which was a bigger sample. But to say that's not pertinent to the crime when it's in the midst of all these other samples like he's mentioning is absolutely spot on. But this is the part where I just fall to pieces on this guy being our expert. He makes all of these arguments about unknown male B. All of these arguments, and he leaves out, and this is our DNA guy, he leaves out the most important part about male B. What body fluid cell material did the DNA come from? No body fluid testing of the item 1.1 swab of the K-bar knife sheath front strap was reported. A positive presumptive test for blood was reported on item 30. A swab of a small red stain underside of the stairwell, north wall between the first and second floor. So right there, you know, item B is blood. There's one. When did the male DNA get deposited? There are no reliable, widely adopted tests to determine when DNA from biological material was deposited. In this case, neither of item 1.1, swab of the K-bar knife sheath front strap, male DNA profile, or item 30, a swab of a small red stain underside the stair handrail, male DNA profile, exhibited severe degradation, often associated with old deposits of biological material. So he's going through and he's painting the picture that B is an old degraded sample. And this is where this gets egregious, y'all. How did the male DNA get deposited? The DNA recovered from item 1.1, swab of the K-bar knife sheath front strap, could have come from direct contact from skin cells and or deposits of body fluids with DNA content such as saliva or sweat. There's no confirmatory test or standardized set of factors to support a specific sample was deposited by direct means versus indirect means. There's no confirmatory test or standardized set of factors to support whether it's deposited by direct or indirect means. But then he goes on to say a probabilistic mathematical approach would be required to evaluate one activity as opposed to the other. If there's no confirmatory test or standardized set of factors to support whether a specific sample was deposited by direct means or indirect means, then how do you follow that up with a probabilistic mathematical approach would be required to evaluate one activity as opposed to the other, when the other DNA expert in the case clearly states that the literature and all the studies say you cannot, by any means, say how DNA got to an object by either direct or indirect means. So you not only do you contradict your own statement in the same paragraph, you contradict what the other DNA specialist in the case says about how that DNA could have been deposited. And give me a break. He follows it up with the DNA recovered from the presumed blood stain on the underside of the handrail, north wall between the first and second floors, item 30, must have been deposited after some minor injury by direct contact or indirect contact, secondary transfer, but it cannot be determined if the DNA recovered was deposited passively before the crime or actively during the crime. So it can't be determined, can it? Is that right there, Mr. Expert? And you know what? It exhibited severe degradation associated with old deposits of biological material, making the state's case for them. Well, if you were really an expert, you would have dove in a little bit deeper on unknown male B, guy. Because you are so smart, their DNA expert, the DNA obtained from the profile known as item 30, unknown male B, is a mixture of DNA with a major profile, which is determined to be from an unknown male, and assuming a 3-person mixture, 2 additional unknown individuals are potential contributors to the minor profile. So your argument of this is a passive, could be a passive stain. How do you have a passive stain that's a guy's blood mixed with 2 other people's DNA? Now, when was the last time somebody cut themselves and then mixed in blood of 2 other people? Because it said it was tested presumptive positive for blood. So that's not 1 person's blood, it's 3 people's. So what are you telling me? That this house contains blood of people that are unalived there weekly? And you're the DNA expert. You can't make this argument, but I can because I read the freaking report. What did you read, guy? And what are you talking about seeing severe degradation? I haven't seen that anywhere in this report. Let me look again. So here you go, expert. When you're looking at the number of contributors for unknown male B, it's 3, clearly broken down. There's 3 different people's DNA in this blood. And the degradation starting at 77.0 BPU. They said degradation starting at 4.2. Let's compare that to, let's say, the sample just right across from it of Ethan's. Okay, here's Ethan's. It has 2 contributors, much higher concentration of the first. Degradation starting at 77.0 BP and 16626 to 0.119. 4.2, 0.115, 0.59. Yeah, I would say that the degradation seems to be pretty consistent across the 2 samples that you find there. I don't understand these experts. Now, he does finish up with this statement, which I do agree with. There were missed opportunities with the CODIS. The number of perpetrators involved in committing this complex crime is unknown. It would have been prudent to have considered that more than one of the unknown male profiles might be involved and use CODIS to help answer that question as a case approach strategy by the lead law enforcement agency instead of assuming only one possible perpetrator. Only unknown male A was searched and uploaded to the National DNA Index System, the NDIS database. Furthermore, not all forensic unknown DNA profiles are eligible for the NDIS upload and would only be in the State DNA Index System, the SDIS, which is like a state CODIS. Manual or one-time keyboard searches can be done with forensic unknown DNA profiles that have a minimum of at least 6 original CODIS core loci, and moderate match MME of at least 60,000 is calculated by the CODIS software. Laboratory to laboratory one-time search requests can be done between NDIS participating laboratories to search SDIS databases from neighboring states. No manual search requests appear to have been made for any of the unknown male profiles A, B, or D. What? No manual search requests appear to have been made for any of the unknown male profiles A, B, or D. A is Q1.1 DNA on the knife sheath. What are you saying there? That there wasn't a search request for unknown male A? There's no manual search request for unknown male A? Then how do you say only unknown male A was searched and uploaded to the National DNA Index System database? This guy is not only not good, he's completely ridiculously inept. You can't say that unknown male A was searched through the NDIS database and then say no manual search requests appear to have been made for unknown male A. But you can say that no manual search requests appear to be done for B or D, which is true. And they could have absolutely put it in the state database. But they didn't, because they didn't. Why didn't they? Who knows? But Stutler, I'm going to change your name to Stutter. So once again, experts, knowing what we know now, going through the documentation and seeing what their expert came to the conclusion of, the lab did a great job when their expert ran a lab that was just a total nightmare, and he said that that lab was doing a great job. So I can imagine him thinking, well, the Idaho lab, well, really doing a great job. Heck, my lab, we was, putting people away daily that didn't do it. This lab, they apparently are only putting away some of the people that didn't do it. I mean, that would be a great job for him, I guess. But then when you get deep into his determinations on things, you see why he would think that lab is doing a great job, because he's obviously an expert in nothing with all that education, all that experience. Just my humble opinion. But when my little humble opinion can go through and pick apart this expert's opinion on the same material, but I can show you where the expert is a freaking jack, I shouldn't be able to do that because I'm not an expert. But I'll let you decide who's right and who's wrong in this. I don't care if I'm wrong on things, but I do care when an expert gets things wrong, especially when a man's life is in the balance. Let me know your thoughts in this one, please. And please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.